Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So for purposes of introduction, my name is Tim Arsenault. I am the elected town clerk in Vernon, and I also am a part-time employee of Brattleboro radio station WTSA, and I am a member of the Vermont Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame. With us is, and thank you for doing that, Lindsay Owen from Disability Rights Vermont, and Val Hughes from the Vermont Center for Independent Living, and she has an ASL interpreter with her. So I guess what I'd like to ask first of both of you is, what are the challenges that voters are facing in using the accessible voting machine that is available in Vermont? Go ahead.
Thank you. I can start. This is Lindsay Owen, Executive Director at Disability Rights Vermont. I think part of the challenge in using the accessible voting system is awareness that it exists and familiarity among the town clerks on how to use it. It's not intuitive necessarily on how to use it. So I think people are reluctant to kind of spread the word about it and to get familiar with it. The ballots themselves, it sounds like, have to be manually installed by USB drive. So it's not like people can go in on any given day and just play around with the device and get used to it. And so I think that's a real barrier for people when it comes down to election day, and it's a really important event that you want to make sure you do everything correctly. It can be probably overwhelming to some people to give it a chance because they're worried that they might have issues or it may not work correctly. And so I think if there could be a way to utilize the machine regularly, maybe with completely fabricated votes around favorite ice cream, favorite colors, or something just completely arbitrary so people could get used to the device, I think that that would make a huge difference. And just talking about it, I think education and just knowing that anybody can use it regardless of ability would go a long way into people using the device.
Val?
Okay, and so hi, I'm Val Hughes. I'm Deaf Independent Program Coordinator, working for VCIL, Vermont Center of Independent Living. I work all over the state. I work with a range of consumers who would identify as deaf, hard of hearing, late deafened. So I work all over the state. Some people use ASL as their primary language. Some people do not sign at all. So my primary concern is for deaf, blind citizens trying to use these machines. Whether they might need access to Braille, whether that it's like audio output and they can't hear the instructions. And so I'm just wondering how towns feel about allowing an SSP, a support service provider, to accompany a deaf blind community member into these voting situations. I'm wondering if that's allowed, if that's not allowed. So I guess that's my primary concern, the deaf blind community and accessing their right to vote.
I can answer that, at least partially. I have been setting up the machines since 2020, when the state of Vermont began using them. And the machines do have the ability for blind people to hear the instructions via headphones. And there is a toggle machine that can be used to mark the ballot. And people at the polling places would put the ballot itself in a printer, and you could fire off the printer and it would be able to have happen. What we have been concerned about is that there have been times, especially in this latest presidential primary, none of us have used the machine for nearly 2 years since the 2022 general election. And most clerks, even though we have to, we're not as technologically savvy as we might be otherwise. We spent a day at a training in which Lindsay had been involved with, and then we got one of these, a thumb drive with the latest information to download onto the tablet. And we found there was a problem with some of the information on the tablet. So some of us got an additional download for another thumb drive. And then in my case, I had to go into the tablet and manually adjust the margins for the printer so the ballot would come out correctly. Now, a lot of clerks have done that and spent probably 3 days on the training for all of this, and yet nobody came to use the machine. So obviously, we all want to do the right thing, but there's a problem here. How do we correct it? And especially since the state of Vermont bought one of these accessible voting tablets with a printer and all of this technology for every town clerk in the state, some 247 cities and towns. And if it's not getting used, it's frankly a waste of money. We want to make sure everybody has a right to vote, have the opportunity to vote. We want you all to know about it, and maybe this is the start of people knowing about it.
Yes. So I want to go back to Val's question around the deafblind community really quickly, and just remind everyone that people do have a right to bring somebody with them to help them cast their ballot and to help mark their ballot. So that is possible. People who are in the deafblind community should absolutely bring someone with them if they need help using this machine or voting in general. It cannot be, I think, your employer or your union representative. Other than that, like, it can be your friend, it can be your parent, it can be whomever, whatever support person you have. And Tim, I think we had this conversation, and I appreciate this meeting. We talked a lot about, I think, people just knowing what their rights are, and a lot more education around the different ways that people can vote and all of the support that exists or that can exist for someone to participate in the electoral process. And I think that's what's really needed right now is just, I've been attending some civic engagement meetings, and it's really about just motivating and generating hope from our different community members that their votes really are important. And, you know, we're here to help them participate to the fullest extent possible. And that includes using this machine. I mean, it's fantastic that these machines exist. They should be used. Just because they're not being used, you know, I certainly wouldn't want the state to do away with them, because we want to make sure that things remain as accessible as possible. But I think it's a matter of getting the word out there and then somehow making its use less rigid. It seems like it's a great machine, but it also at the same time feels a bit like antiquated. Like you have to manually insert this flash drive and then, you know, use this specific printer, and it seems less accessible in that way. So I think it's a matter of just using it and trying to like work those kinks out. And maybe it's a conversation that needs to happen with Democracy Live around creating these additional ways to use the system and get familiar with it, like the ballot that I had suggested earlier in this meeting.
I have a response, but I want to hear from Val first.
Sure. I think it's a good point that you bring up, that people don't know that they have a right to bring an SSP with them to vote. And as we get closer to this presidential election, of course, Yeah, I'm sure that people are going to be hesitant to vote because of access barriers. And so I think we need to do everything that we can within our power to get the information out there, to do the outreach, and especially to the deafblind community to mean that means for them they can bring someone, a support person with them. And I understand that there are certain limitations around who they can bring with them. But I've heard some people wondering whether they could use an absentee ballot. I know that's often used commonly if people are concerned about access, but I love the idea of having people come out in person. I mean, it's such an important part of who we are as citizens of this state. And yeah, I mean, it really impacts how we feel about ourselves and our sense of belonging.
Well, thank you. I would go further to the point of we would like to see groups like VCIL and Disability Rights Vermont host regional trainings. And I know that the Secretary of State wants to find a way for more people to know and also to do this because, quite frankly, it's the law. Everybody needs to have access. And we want to make sure that you all have it, but to do it in a way that doesn't frustrate anybody and to minimize the problems that we are currently having. So I will be glad to pass on to my association and to the Secretary of State's office that there are things we can do. And quite frankly, even down to the local level, there were very few communities that actually provide ASL interpreters for their annual town meeting. And everyone needs to know that they have a right to ask at least 24 to 48 hours in advance. And in the
Absolutely.
last 3 years, I have done that here in Vernon, a town of only 2,300 people, where there are some deaf adults living. And usually the town of Brattleboro does that, and they are both the former home of the Austin School and a town of 12,000 people. So it makes sense to provide access for anyone who wants to do that. So whatever we can do within the confines of what we're able to do, we are happy to do. And I think it starts here with voting both for the presidential election and also with the Vermont state primary election, which, in case you didn't know, is the second Tuesday of August, August 13th, to mark on your calendar. We should be doing things in advance of that election, since the Omni tablet ballot will be available for that election as well.
Thank you, Tim. Disability Rights Vermont would gladly do some educational trainings or just outreach to different communities around what folks have a right to request and how to participate. We do every 2 years during a presidential, or every 2 years we do a voter's guide for people with disabilities. And so we include a lot of information in that booklet that talks about how to participate in the process, what the process looks like. But it's only as good as the hands that pass it out, kind of, so it exists. It's something that we put out there. But I think what us as a group and as community partners need to do is really promote those types of materials and be proactive and saying like, hey, and not questioning like, do you have a disability? Then read this. But really for anyone, I mean, it's a great educational resource that just says, hey, the election's coming up, take a look at this material. If there's anything you need or you have any questions, let me know. Because otherwise we distribute them pretty widely to different designated agencies. But that takes a person really thinking about it and feeling like, yeah, this is something that I'm interested in, versus somebody being like, you have this right, and you should consider participating. So I think we just need to be more proactive as a community in reaching out to folks, and educating folks. So I'd be happy to work with Val or anyone else around, doing some of these educational opportunities.
Sure, sounds good to me. Yeah, and I'm really happy to partner with you, Lindsay. And yeah, I mean, we've worked together in the past, so of course, a big hearty yes to doing that. And I wouldn't mind doing a vlog, so a video blog, if you will, for the deaf community, and we can caption it, and so we can get that link out to people, so it's in the deaf community's native language. We can figure out how to make it accessible to deaf blind people, but we definitely need to promote this as much as possible. You said the Vermont State primary is coming up at in August, that second week, and really, I want to get on that as soon as possible and start doing the outreach for our communities. Yeah, and you mentioned town meeting. Tim, hats off to you for your town making the request for your town having the budget, the funds available to provide access as far as interpreting services. And I think it's great. And I think it's also important that deaf people are aware that interpreting services are provided. There's been towns that have said when the request was made, we don't have that in our budget. And I think it's just, it's exemplary that Vernon figured it out, such a small town. And so you may know Rebecca Lillane at DeVos. She has confronted that situation with other towns. And she said, and I know that she has pointed out that Vernon does that. And so there are many people across the state, deaf community members, deafblind community members, who have asked, and in essence, the town has tried to deny them that access. So that's another piece that I would like us to see working in collaboration on to resolve that as well. So town meeting day and access, not just voting.
Well, thank you. So the question is, where do we go from here? I would like to take this back again to the Clerks Association and to the Secretary of State. And I believe the Secretary of State also is going to be holding a meeting with the vendor for the Omni tablet ballot machine to make sure we can minimize any technical issues that could be holding up the process. So hopefully all of us will work from here together, because after all, it's not only the right thing to do, it's not only the law, but in my case, it's family.
Agreed.
Um,
Yes. Yes, I agree.
So, in terms of like next steps, I think it really is planning to do some significant outreach and education this summer. Our voters guide doesn't get printed until after the August primary, because we want to know who's going to be on the ballot. And so that is one setback in terms of providing that particular piece of outreach, but I think we could easily collaborate just on the use of this machine and voting rights in general, like in preparation for the August primary. And I can work with the Secretary of State's office. I mean, it is, as you said, Tim, it's the right thing to do, it's the law, and it's about our families, but I also think it's to date that hasn't seemed to be enough of a motivator. So I'm like, I wonder if we make some sort of like, what can we offer as sort of an incentive, like be on this list like Vernon of really great towns that just get it, that get inclusivity, that get accessibility. And I think being proud of your town and your ability to welcome everybody who lives in it, we gotta try and find a way to incentivize that more, so that people are like, yeah, like this is kind of a daunting, clunky machine, but it'll be really great for the few people that want to come in and use it. And we should be proud, as I live in Morrisville. So I would love to motivate my town to really embrace its use and educating people. And I think there's a few steps. Definitely this summer. I love traveling in the summer around Vermont. So I think it's, boots on the ground, traveling and just opening up our doors in different towns to use this system. And it's a conversation with the vendor around piloting some sort of mock ballot that people can come in and play around with. Because it is not an intuitive, pretty system. It's this clunky box that, I think can kind of intimidate people.
Well, the last thing any of us want to do is intimidate people. And I think that for the town clerk's part, some of us are intimidated by the technology. We have seen a lot more demands on our time and a lot more technical things that have hit us, including elections, within the last decade. And we haven't seen additional staffing to keep up with that. So I think that's where, on our part, the rub comes in. So we will, redouble our efforts to work together. And after all, we're all Vermonters, and that's really what it comes down to.
Agreed. Great comments, Tim. I think it's a great idea to have a training or kind of a time 2 or 3 weeks before any election, an open house, if you will, where folks can come in if they're hesitant about using the technology. Like you said, make up a mock ballot. What's your favorite ice cream? Something like that. And just let people actually experience the technology before voting day. I think that would go a long way in helping bring people in.
And it sounds silly, but I'm even thinking of including ice cream, right? Doing like an ice cream social. I recently was attending events and legislators were talking about, it sounds a little bit silly, but they're more likely to engage in public events if food is provided. And so I think we have to be mindful of like what's going to draw people in.
Absolutely.
Like let's make this exciting and, enticing and just call it like it is. I mean, if you offer people free ice cream, you're going to get more people to show up, because I think there is still, unfortunately, a lot of stigma around having a disability, and sometimes particular types of disabilities. There's a lot of so much stigma so that people sometimes don't even want to identify as having a disability. So I think if you frame it in a different way, and it's not about ability or disability, and it's about just participating in this process, regardless of who you are, and have some free ice cream in July, then I think we'll get a lot more people.
All right.
It is during the summer. You're right. Perfect timing. Yeah, perfect timing. Perfect opportunity for people to get out. Most people like, free ice cream period, right? Who have you met that doesn't? So perfect season, perfect timing, perfect hook. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, kids could have a lemonade stand in your community. Set that up. I love seeing kids like that, baked cookies, or bring, just an arts and crafts show, or just something. These children are our future. And so how great would it be to come up with an idea to include children in the program? They're going to see democracy in action and elections in action, and seeing community civic engagement at a young age. What could be better?
Well, thank you both. Is there anything else either of you would like to say before I wrap this up?
Just thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate this meeting, and Disability Rights Vermont is always available to brainstorm and to collaborate on voting access, but just access in general.
Right. And the three of us, we can touch base via email around how to do this outreach, any specific ideas. I'm excited and up for the challenge. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being involved in this.
Great. And I look forward to working with both of you. Thank you both for your time and your attention
Yeah,
to this.
thank you. And I hope you all have a great day.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording as of now.